When my husband died, I thought the worst part of my life had already happened. But I was wrong. Just days after his funeral, his brother took over our family business worth $50 million and looked me straight in the eye. He said, "You deserve nothing." I stood there frozen, my heart breaking all over again. But only 3 days later, the bank called me in, and what happened inside that office made his face turn white. If you want to hear how this story unfolds, make sure you subscribe right now and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. My name is Elena Carter. Until last year, I lived what I thought was a simple but happy life. My husband Daniel was not just my partner, he was my best friend. He had built Carter Enterprises from the ground up with honesty, hard work, and vision. I wasn't directly involved in the business, but I was proud of him every single day. My role was at home, raising our 2 children, Sophia, who is 10, and Matthew, who is 7. Daniel was the kind of man who never missed dinner with the kids, no matter how busy he was. He tucked them into bed, told them stories, and reminded me often that everything he did for us. We didn't live in a world of fancy parties or endless travel. We lived in a world of love, family, and the sense that we could count on each other. But then everything changed. Daniel's sudden death shattered our world. It wasn't just grief that hit me. It was the silence at the dinner table, the empty side of the bed, the way Matthew cried for his dad at night, and the way Sophia grew quiet, almost too mature for her age. I tried to stay strong for them. At Daniel's funeral, I held their little hands and whispered, "We'll be okay." Daddy made sure of it. I truly believed that. Daniel had always been so careful with the company. I thought he had planned everything, but standing just a few feet away at the funeral was his brother, Victor. He barely spoke to me, barely even looked at the kids. There was something in his eyes that day. Not sadness, not grief, but something else, something darker. At the time, I brushed it off. I told myself everyone handles death differently. I didn't know then that Victor was already making plans that would not only threaten Daniel's legacy, but also leave me and my children with nothing. 3 days after Daniel's funeral, I received a message from Victor, my brother-in-law. He wanted me to come to the company office for a family meeting. The way he phrased it made me uneasy. There was no warmth in his words, no hint of compassion. It felt like a summons, not an invitation. But I went, because this company wasn't just numbers on a piece of paper. It was Daniel's life's work. It was supposed to secure my children's future. I remember walking into that boardroom like it happened yesterday. The walls were lined with framed photos of Carter Enterprises milestones, new buildings, ribbon cuttings, charity events where Daniel always smiled proudly. His presence seemed to fill the room, but he wasn't there. Instead, Victor sat at the head of the table in Daniel's old chair. Papers were neatly stacked in front of him, and his expression was colder than the air-conditioned room. "Sit down, Elena," he said, his voice flat. I took a seat, my hands trembling slightly under the table. For a moment, I hoped this meeting was about honoring Daniel, about discussing how to carry his vision forward. But the second Victor opened his mouth, my hope disappeared. "As of today," he said, adjusting his tie, "I am taking full control of Carter Enterprises. Daniel may have run things his way, but now it's my turn." I stared at him, confused. "What are you talking about? Daniel would never want you to run everything alone. He built this company for his family." Victor leaned back in the chair, his lips curling into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Family? Don't fool yourself, Elena. This business requires leadership, not sentiment. Daniel didn't leave you in charge because you don't belong here. You deserve nothing. That's the truth." Those words cut deeper than any knife. My chest burned as if I couldn't breathe. Nothing? I was his wife. We raised children together. He trusted me. Victor slammed his hand lightly on the table, his voice sharpening. "You don't understand how the world works. Wives grieve, and then they step aside. Men like Daniel and me, we build, we lead. You wouldn't last a day handling this company." Anger rose inside me, pushing through the layers of grief. "You think I can't handle responsibility? My children deserve security. I won't let you erase what Daniel built for them." Victor chuckled, a sound that sent chills down my spine. "Children don't run companies, Elena." "I do. And unless you want to embarrass yourself, you'll stay out of the way." For a moment, The room went silent, except for the faint hum of the air vent. I felt helpless, but I refused to let him see me break. Later that evening, I went back home, my mind spinning. I sat in the living room with my parents, Thomas and Linda. My father, a retired accountant, could always sense when something was wrong. He looked at me over his glasses and said, "Tell us what happened." I explained everything, from the way Victor sat in Daniel's chair to the cruel words he had thrown at me. My mother gasped, placing a hand over her mouth. "That man has no shame," she whispered. My father leaned forward, his face stern but calm. "Elena, don't panic. Daniel was smart. He would not leave you and the children unprotected. There must be something in writing, something legal. Victor may think he's in charge, but the truth has a way of coming out." I wanted to believe him, but doubt gnawed at me. What if Daniel didn't finish the paperwork? What if Victor is right? What if we really have nothing? My father shook his head firmly. "No, Daniel loved you too much for that. We'll find the truth that night." I barely slept. Every creak of the house made me sit up. My mind replayed Victor's words again and again. "You deserve nothing." The cruelty in his tone haunted me. I thought about Sophia and Matthew, sleeping peacefully in their rooms, unaware of the storm brewing around us. How could I tell them that their uncle was trying to steal everything their father left behind? 3 days later, just when my fear was at its worst, the phone rang. It was Mr. Reynolds, the family's longtime banker. His voice was steady, but serious. "Mrs. Carter, I need you to come into the bank tomorrow morning. It's about your husband's business papers." For a moment, my stomach dropped. "What business papers?" My hands shook as I held the phone. "Is something wrong?" I asked. "There's nothing to worry about," Mr. Reynolds replied carefully, "but it's important you come in. Bring anyone you trust." The call ended, but my heart raced. What could it mean? Did Daniel leave something behind for me? Did he plan for this? When I told my father about the call, his eyes lit with determination. "This is it," he said. "This is what we've been waiting for." And so the next morning, I gathered my courage, held my father's hand, and walked into the bank. What happened there would change everything. The next morning, I woke before the sun. I hadn't slept much the night before. My mind kept circling around that phone call from Mr. Reynolds, the banker. Something about his voice told me this wasn't a routine meeting. I got dressed carefully, choosing a plain black dress with a simple silver necklace Daniel had given me years ago. I wanted to look strong, even though inside I was still breaking. My father, Thomas, insisted on coming with me. As we drove to the bank, he kept one hand on the steering wheel and the other tapping against his knee, a habit he had when deep in thought. "Stay calm, Elena," he said firmly. "Bankers don't call meetings like this unless there's something important. Daniel would have prepared for you and the children. Don't let fear cloud your mind." I nodded, trying to absorb his reassurance, but the knot in my stomach only tightened. What if this meeting revealed there was nothing left? What if Victor really had all the control? I couldn't bear to imagine telling Sophia and Matthew that their future had been stolen by their own uncle. When we arrived at the bank, the heavy glass doors seemed colder than usual. Inside, the air smelled faintly of polished wood and paper. Mr. Reynolds was waiting for us in a private meeting room. He was an older man, kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, and he had known Daniel since the earliest days of Carter Enterprise. "Mrs. Carter, Mr. Carter," he said, shaking our hand. "Thank you for coming." He gestured to the table where a thick folder sat sealed with the bank's stamp. "There are some matters regarding Daniel's accounts and company ownership that we need to address." Before I could respond, the door opened sharply, and Victor walked in. My breath caught in my chest. Of course he would be here. He always had a way of showing up where power was being discussed. He looked at me with that same cold stare as in the boardroom. "I see you were called in too," he said, his tone dismissive. Mr. Reynolds cleared his throat. "Yes, Victor. I asked both of you here. It's important that everything is handled transparently." Victor sat down opposite me, his posture straight, his expression confident, as if he had already won whatever this was about. I clenched my fists under the table, reminding myself I was here for Daniel, for my children, for the truth. Mr. Reynolds carefully opened the folder and pulled out several documents. His voice was calm, but each word seemed to carry weight. Before his passing, Daniel left detailed instructions regarding Carter Enterprises. He knew this company was more than a business. It was his family's future. He wanted to ensure there would be no disputes. Victor leaned forward, a smug grin tugging at his lips. I'm glad you called me in. I'm the natural successor. Let's make this quick. But Mr. Reynolds shook his head slightly. Not quite. Daniel took steps to protect his family. He signed a trust agreement, making Elena the majority shareholder of Carter Enterprises. She holds 51% of the company. The rest is placed in trust for the children. The room went silent. My ears rang, as if I hadn't heard correctly. My heart pounded so loudly, I thought everyone else could hear it. Victor's smile faded instantly. His face stiffened, and for the first time since Daniel's funeral, I saw something I never expected on him. Fear. He opened his mouth, then closed it, searching for words. Finally, he sputtered, "That can't be right. I've been running operations for years. Daniel would never leave it to her. She doesn't know anything about business." Mr. Reynolds remained steady. "I can assure you, this is correct. Daniel signed and notarized everything months before his death. He wanted his wife and children protected above all else. These documents are legally binding." My father reached over and gently squeezed my hand. His eyes filled with pride. "I told you, Elena," he whispered. "Daniel wouldn't leave you unprotected." I finally found my voice, though it shook at first. "Victor, you looked me in the eye and told me I deserved nothing, but Daniel thought differently. He trusted me. He trusted his family. He knew I could carry his legacy." Victor slammed his palm on the table. "This is a mistake. She can't run this company. The board will never follow her." Mr. Reynolds didn't flinch. "The board has no choice. The majority shareholder decides. Elena has the final say." In that moment, I felt something shift inside me. The grief was still there, the pain of losing Daniel still heavy, but it was joined by a new strength. Daniel had trusted me, even when I doubted myself. He had prepared for this exact battle, and now it was my responsibility to stand firm. I straightened my shoulders and looked Victor directly in the eyes. "You thought you could scare me. You thought you could steal what Daniel built. But this company is ours, and I will protect it. For Sophia, for Matthew, and for the man who believed in me." Victor sat back, pale, his hands gripping the armrests of his chair. He had no words left. For the first time, he realized he had lost control. As we left the bank that day, the morning sun felt warmer, brighter. I still carried grief, but now I also carried Daniel's legacy and the power to defend it. The battle wasn't over, but the balance had shifted, and I was ready. Leaving the bank that morning, I felt like my whole world had shifted. For the first time since Daniel's death, I wasn't drowning only in grief. I felt something else rising in me. Strength. The truth was out. The papers were real, and Victor's power was slipping away. But this wasn't the end. I knew Victor wouldn't walk away quietly. He wasn't the type of man to admit defeat. Sure enough, 2 days later, Victor called an emergency board meeting. He wanted to challenge my authority in front of the directors. I could feel his desperation. He thought if he humiliated me publicly, I would step down. My father urged me to go. "This is your moment, Elena," he told me. "You have the documents, the truth, and Daniel's foresight behind you. Do not let Victor bully you again." The morning of the meeting, I walked into the boardroom with my head held high. My hands still trembled, but this time I wasn't afraid. I wore a navy suit Daniel had once said made me look like I could run the world. The directors were already seated, murmuring quietly, their eyes shifting between me and Victor. At the head of the table, Victor sat stiffly, his jaw clenched tight. He began the meeting without hesitation. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are here because there has been a misunderstanding. My late brother's wife, Elena, believes she now controls Carter Enterprises. While I respect her grief, she has no experience in business and cannot possibly handle the responsibility of this company." He turned toward me, smirking. "This is not a home. This is a $50 million empire. It requires leadership, not emotion." The directors shifted uncomfortably. A few nodded at his words, while others glanced at me with sympathy. My heart pounded, but I forced myself to breathe and stand tall. When he finished, I slowly rose from my seat. "Victor is right about one thing," I began, my voice steady, though my palms were damp. "I am not a businessman. I am not here to pretend I am something I'm not. But let's be very clear. Daniel built this company for his family, and he made sure to protect it. He signed legal documents making me the majority shareholder and trustee for our children. I didn't choose this role. Daniel chose it for me. He trusted me. I reached into my folder and placed the notarized documents on the table for everyone to see. The directors leaned forward, their eyes scanning the signatures, the seals, the undeniable proof. Victor's face turned pale again. These papers mean nothing without leadership. She will ruin everything, he barked, his voice rising. I turned to him, my anger finally breaking free. No, Victor. What would ruin this company is greed. What would destroy it is your obsession with power. Daniel knew who you were. That's why he didn't give it to you. He trusted me, because he trusted the values we built this family on. Integrity, hard work, legacy, things you could never understand. The room was quiet. The directors, once uncertain, now looked at Victor differently. His shouting had exposed him, while my words carried the weight of truth. One of the older directors, Mr. Harris, cleared his throat. I worked with Daniel for 20 years. He always said his family came first. If this is his wish, then I will respect it. Another director nodded. I agree. Elena holds the majority. That's the law. And it's also what Daniel wanted. Victor slammed his fists on the table, his voice cracking. You're all making a mistake. She has no idea how to run a business. I met his glare calmly. You're right, Victor. I don't know everything about running a business, but I know how to learn, and I know how to surround myself with people who understand what Daniel built. I will not stand by and let you destroy it. If you truly cared about this company, you'd step aside and let it grow the way Daniel intended. Victor looked around the room, searching for support, but none of the directors met his eyes. One by one, they lowered their gazes or looked toward me. His power had evaporated in that moment. For a long second, the only sound was the ticking of the clock on the wall. Then Mr. Harris spoke again. The matter is settled. Elena is the rightful majority shareholder. We will follow her lead. Victor's face turned red with rage, but he couldn't argue with the truth. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping the floor, and stormed out of the room without another word. As the doors closed behind him, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. My father reached over and squeezed my shoulder, his eyes shining with pride. I felt tears sting my eyes, but they weren't tears of grief this time. They were tears of relief, of vindication, of strength. I looked around the boardroom, at the men and women who had worked beside Daniel for years. I am not Daniel, I said softly, but I am his wife. I am the mother of his children, and I will honor what he built. I will make sure Carter Enterprises remains strong, not for me, but for the family he loved and the legacy he left. For the first time since Daniel's death, I saw respect in their eyes. Not pity, not doubt, respect. And in that moment, I knew I had stepped into the role Daniel had prepared me for. I was no longer just a grieving widow. I was the guardian of his legacy. When I walked out of that boardroom, I felt like a different woman. Just weeks before, I had been a grieving widow, struggling to breathe, barely holding myself together for my children. But now, I walked with a strength I didn't know I had. I had faced Victor, I had faced doubt, and I had faced the crushing fear of losing everything Daniel had worked for. And I had won, not because I was stronger than Victor, but because Daniel had believed in me and left behind the tools I needed to fight. That night, when I came home, Sophia and Matthew were waiting for me in the living room. They had been so quiet since their father's death, tiptoeing around me, afraid to ask too many questions. But when they saw the look on my face, their eyes lit up. Sophia, always more perceptive than her age, asked, "Mom, what happened today? You look different." I knelt down in front of them, pulling both of them close. "Your daddy loved you more than anything in the world," I told them softly, "and he made sure that no one could ever take away what he built for us. We're safe, and we're going to be okay." Matthew hugged me tightly and whispered, "So Uncle Victor can't take Daddy's company?" I smiled and shook my head. "No, sweetheart. Daddy made sure the company belongs to us. Uncle Victor won't be in charge anymore." The relief in their little faces broke my heart all over again. They had been carrying fears I didn't even realize. That night, for the first time in weeks, they slept peacefully, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't cry myself to sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about Daniel. I whispered into the quiet, You knew I could do this, even when I didn't believe in myself. Thank you for trusting me. In the days that followed, I began stepping into my new role. It wasn't easy. There were meetings, documents, financial terms I had to learn quickly, and decisions I had to make that once would have terrified me. But with every step, I reminded myself, this wasn't about being perfect. This was about honoring Daniel's legacy and protecting the future of our children. The employees of Carter Enterprises, many of whom had worked under Daniel for years, were hesitant at first. They weren't sure if I could handle the pressure, but I made a choice. I would be honest with them. I gathered the staff together and said, I am not Daniel, and I will never try to replace him. But I am his wife, and I carry his vision with me. He built this company on trust and values, and I will continue that. Slowly, they began to see I wasn't just a figurehead. I was willing to learn, to listen, and to lead with integrity. Victor, on the other hand, didn't take his defeat gracefully. He tried for a while to challenge the documents legally, but the papers Daniel had signed were airtight. Every attempt he made failed. Eventually, he disappeared from the business entirely. I can't say I felt sorry for him, because he brought his downfall on himself. Greed may give a person temporary power, but it never lasts. As months passed, I noticed something else changing too. Me. I was no longer the woman who thought she had to stand quietly in the background. I was no longer afraid of boardrooms or contracts or men who thought they could intimidate me. I became someone stronger, not because I wanted to, but because life demanded it. And I realized that sometimes the greatest gift someone can leave you isn't money or property, it's faith. Daniel had given me his faith, and that gave me the courage to fight. Looking back, I learned something I want to share with anyone listening. Grief can make you feel powerless, but strength often rises when you least expect it. The people who love us the most leave us with more than memories. They leave us with the courage to keep going, even when they're gone. Now, when I tuck Sophia and Matthew into bed, I don't just tell them stories. I remind them of their father's love, his values, and the truth that family is more important than greed. I tell them, we are stronger than what we lose. We carry the people we love inside of us, and that makes us unbreakable. And every time I step into Carter Enterprises, I don't just see a company. I see Daniel's dream, alive and growing, and I know I am where I'm meant to be. So, if you take anything from my story, let it be this. Never let anyone tell you that you deserve nothing. You deserve to fight for what's yours, to protect what matters, and to honor the love of those who believed in you. If this story touched you, make sure to subscribe to my channel and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'd love to know.